tree is falling. A monumental tree in the forest is falling. So colossal, so deeply rooted, so elementally entwined that it will not fall easily or swiftly or quietly. And as it looses from the earth, from the sky, earth first, it will shake and sound through the whole forest, through all the rings and canopies, hard and soft woods, all the places of light and shadow, growth and groundwater, quake and resound through all things, winged and footed, flowering, streaming, flourishing here. And when, unmoored, unmasted, it lays at great length to rest among the abundant mosses and ferns, it will be monumentally sad for me to see, to lose, and remember in times to come how glorious a living thing it was, what a high, spiring, spreading hymn of joy it was. It sang without pause in the forest of my heart. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, livecast, and thank you for leaning in to show 125 in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the unlost coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more lively, more poetically. In broadcast 124, we explored our questions about life, self, the world around us. Questions temporal to eternal, rational to emotional, invigorating to challenging. This week, talking of loss. Losses of all kinds, actual or possible, from the personal to the societal to the environmental, from losing loved ones to losing our own health or freedom or desire, to losing our sense of identity, dignity, connection, possibility. At a time when this theme seems to be looming large everywhere in the world, in countless households, communities, countries, not least around the last 2 years of hundreds of millions of people's livelihoods, and the sinking well-being of many vital species, foremost the bees, the great crop pollinators, and the health of our oceans and the very air we breathe, without which we each and all have everything sustaining all life here on earth, our own lives, to lose. Losses as a society we can't afford to lose and can avert. We would do well, I believe, to wisely attend to what may be greatly at stake anytime, individually and collectively, in each part of our lives and our shared world. And yes, deeply appreciate, cherish all the gifts and graces we do have while we have them, however long or short that may be. Well, I hope the cultural commentary, poetry, and musings I've sourced for us on this theme is inviting, is illuminating for you and me. Even the sourcing of it is illuminating as I go through things. Let's lean in together then. Think and feel into it together. Since we're on the very cusp of autumn and we're losing summer in a way again, here's a poem by Amy Lowell, Autumn. All day I have watched the purple vine leaves fall into the water, and now in the moonlight they still fall, but each leaf is fringed with silver. Thank you, Amy Lowell. Naomi Shihab Nye's poem, NYE, Burning the Old Year. Letters swallow themselves in seconds. Notes friends tied to the doorknob, transparent scarlet paper sizzle like moth wings, marry the air. So much of any year is flammable. Lists of vegetables, partial poems, orange swirling flame of days. So little is a stone. Where there was something and suddenly isn't. An absence shouts, celebrates, leaves a space. I begin again with the smallest numbers. Quick dance, shuffle of losses and leaves. Only the things I didn't do crackle after the blazing dies. Thank you, Naomi Shihab-Nye. That's from her collection Words Under the Words. Jane Hirschfield has this poem, Optimism. More and more, I've come to admire resilience, not the simple resistance of a pillow whose foam returns over and over to the same shape, but the sinuous tenacity of a tree. Finding the light newly blocked on one side, it turns in another. A blind intelligence, true, but out of such persistence arose turtles, rivers, mitochondria, figs, all this resinous, unretractable earth. Thank you, Jane Hirschfield. That's from her collection, Each Happiness Ringed by Lions. Pablo Neruda, a dog has died. My dog has died. I buried him in the garden next to a rusted old machine. Someday I'll join him right there, but now he's gone with his shaggy coat, his bad manners, and his cold nose, and I, the materialist, who never believed in any promised heaven in the sky for any human being, I believe in a heaven I'll never enter. Yes, I believe in a heaven for all dogdom, where my dog waits for my arrival, waving his fan-like tail in friendship. I'll not speak of sadness here on earth, of having lost a companion who was never servile. His friendship for me, like that of a porcupine withholding its authority, was the friendship of a star, aloof, with no more intimacy than was called for, with no exaggerations. He never climbed all over my clothes, filling me full of his hair or his mange. He never rubbed up against my knee like other dogs obsessed with sex. No, my dog used to gaze at me, paying me the attention I need, the attention required to make a vain person like me understand that, being a dog, he was wasting time. But with those eyes so much purer than mine, he'd keep on gazing at me with a look that reserved for me alone all his sweet and shaggy life, always near me, never troubling me, and asking nothing. How many times have I envied his tail as we walked together on the shores of the sea in the lonely winter of Isla Negra, where the wintering birds filled the sky, and my hairy dog was jumping about full of the voltage of the sea's movement, my wandering dog sniffing away with his golden tail held high, face to face with the ocean's spray. Joyful, 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 as only dogs know how to be happy, with only the autonomy of their shameless spirit. There are no goodbyes for my dog who has died, and we don't know and never did lie to each other. So now he's gone, and I buried him, and that's all there is to it. Thank you, Neruda. Well, on a light note, how about the death of the hat? Cultural loss of a different kind, that custom that reflects a bygone era, the way people dressed, not least men in hats. This is Billy Collins' poem, The Death of the Hat. Once every man wore a hat. In the ashen newsreels, the avenues of cities are broad rivers flowing with hats. The ballparks swelled with thousands of straw hats, brims, and bands, rows of men smoking and cheering in shirt sleeves. Hats were the law. They went without saying. You noticed a man without a hat in a crowd. You bought them from Adams or Dobbs, who branded your initials in gold on the inside band. Trolleys crisscrossed the city. Steamships sailed in and out of the harbor. Men with hats gathered on the docks. There was a person to block your hat, and a hat-check girl to mind it while you had a drink or ate a steak with peas and a baked potato. In your office stood a hat rack. The day the war was declared, everyone in the street was wearing a hat, and they were wearing hats when a ship loaded with men sank in the icy sea. My father wore one to work every day and returned home carrying the evening paper, the winter chill radiating from his overcoat. But today, we go bareheaded into the winter streets, stand hatless on frozen platforms. Today, the mailboxes on the roadside and the spruce trees behind the house wear cold white hats of snow. Mice scurry from the stone walls at night in their thin fur hats to eat the bird seed that is spilled. And now my father, after a life of work, wears a hat of earth, and on top of that, a lighter one of cloud and sky, a hat of wind. Thank you, Billy Collins. Well, I and others are doing our best to keep the lost custom alive by sporting classic hats, from fedoras to Panamas. Maybe you too. From lossesintranslation.com, they were speaking of various types of losses. I'm just going to pull out a couple of them. Immigration losses, usually profound, involving, as they do, so many of life's anchors and stabilizers. They typically involve losses of status, family roots, financial certainty, losses of support systems, of identity, friendships, language, things known and self-evident, cultural identities and certainties, losses of self-image, and the like. Not sure we think about that a lot when people are dispossessed of their country, or leave their country, even whether they want to or not. Physical losses, of course, relationship losses that come from divorce. I'm one of those. Or other relationship breakups that result also from children leaving home, the empty nest syndrome. Losses with the end of intimate friendships, resulting from disagreements or immigration or death, and finally changes in family and social connections due to geographical moves. And yes, losses of freedom, but we're going to come to that later. Just wanted to call a few things out there. Pico Iyer, I-Y-E-R, reflected on what the country of his heart, Japan, home, of course, to the philosophy of wabi-sabi, taught him about the heart's seasons. He said, "I long to be in Japan in the autumn. For much of the year, my job, reporting on foreign conflicts and globalism on a human scale, forces me out onto the road, and with my mother in her 80s, living alone in the hills of California, I need to be there much of the time. But I try each year to be back in Japan for the season of fire and farewells. Cherry blossoms pretty and frothy as schoolgirls' giggles are the face the country likes to present to the world, all pink and white eroticism, but it's the reddening of the maple leaves under a blaze of ceramic blue skies that is the place's secret heart. We cherish things. Japan is always known precisely because they cannot last. It's their frailty that adds sweetness to their beauty. In the central literary text of the land, the tale of Genji, the word for impermanence is used more than 1,000 times, and bright amorous Prince Genji is said to be a, quote, handsomer man in sorrow than in happiness. Beauty, the foremost Jungian in Japan has observed, is, quote, completed only if we accept the fact of death. Autumn poses the question we all have to live with. How do you hold on to the things we love, even though we know that we and they are dying? How to see the world as it is, yet find light within that truth. Thank you, Pico Iyer. Well, apropos of losing a country, leaving a country one loved and was part of, is this poem by Dunya Mikhail. I was in a hurry. It's translated by Elizabeth Winslow. Yesterday I lost a country. I was in a hurry and didn't notice when it fell from me like a broken branch from a forgetful tree. Please, if anyone passes by and stumbles across it, perhaps in a suitcase open to the sky, or engraved on a rock like a gaping wound, or wrapped in the blankets of immigrants, or canceled like a losing lottery ticket, or helplessly forgotten in purgatory, or rushing forward without a goal like the questions of children, or rising with the smoke of war, or rolling in a helmet on the sand, or stolen in Ali Baba's jar, or disguised in the uniform of a policeman who stirred up the prisoners and fled, or squatting in the mind of a woman who tries to smile, or scattered like the dreams of new immigrants in America. If anyone stumbles across it, return it to me, please. Please return it, sir. Please return it, madam. It is my country. I was in a hurry when I lost it yesterday. Thank you, Dunya Mikhail. I was in a hurry from her collection, The War Works Hard, 2005. By the way, that opening poem, of course, it could refer to a beautiful tree in the forest, and there is great sadness around losing them, like the sequoias, great redwoods. But that was actually the loss of a beautiful love in my life years back. And I wrote that in the aftermath. Megan O'Rourke on how we grieve, on the messiness of mourning and learning to live with loss. This is from her book, The Long Goodbye. Lovely book. The people we most love do become a physical part of us, ingrained in our synapses and the pathways where memories are created. So in the book, I have a few passages to share with you. You might like to read the whole thing. When we are learning the world, we know things we cannot say how we know. When we're relearning the world in the aftermath of a loss, we feel things we had almost forgotten, old things beneath the seat of reason. Nothing prepared me for the loss of my mother. Even knowing that she would die did not prepare me. A mother, after all, is your entry into the world. She's the shell in which you divide and become a life. Waking up in a world without her is like waking up in a world without sky. Unimaginable. When we talk about love, we go back to the start to pinpoint the moment of freefall. But this story is the story of an ending, of death, and it has no beginning. A mother is beyond any notion of a beginning. That's what makes her a mother. You cannot start the story. The hallmark of an anticipatory loss, she says about her mother as she sits alongside her sipping soda in front of the TV on one of her mother's final days, coupled with a great compassion for the sacred humanity of death. She said, time doesn't obey our commands. You cannot make it holy just because it is disappearing. It was what she had done for us back before we had become private and civilized about our bodies. In some ways, I liked it. A level of anxiety about the body had been stripped away, and we were left with the simple reality. Here it was. I heard a lot about the idea of dying, quote, with dignity, while my mother was sick. It was only near her very end that I gave much thought to what this idea meant. I didn't actually feel it was undignified for my mother's body to fail. That was the human condition. Having to help her on and off the toilet was difficult, but it was natural. The real indignity, it seemed, was dying where no one cared for you the way your family did, dying where it was hard for your whole family to be with you, and where excessive measures might be taken to keep you alive, past a moment that called for letting go. I didn't want that for my mother. I wanted her to be able to go home. I didn't want to pretend she wasn't going to die. There is, of course, another side where we lose our resolve, we drop our guard, or just grow tired and descend into that other darker, less lovely world, and we disconnect and retreat deep into ourselves. These revolving feelings of connection and disconnection are the opposing forces of loss that define our lived experience. Many of us inhabit this uncanny realm of loss, and all of us will find our way there in time. I actually ran Megan O'Rourke into Nick Cave, who actually had that those last few lines. He was talking about, he's the Australian singer-songwriter performer. Apologies for actually blending those together, because he actually had this to say, which before that, which was the paradoxical effect of losing a loved one is that their sudden absence can become a feverish comment on that which remains. That which remains rises in time from the dark with a burning physicality, a luminous super-presence, as we acquaint ourselves with this new and different world. In lost things, both animate and inanimate, take on an added intensity and meaning. So, Nick Cave on that. Robert Bly has this poem, The Fat Old Couple Whirling Around. The drum says that the night we die will be a long night. It says the children have time to play. Tell the grown-ups they can pull the curtains around the bed tonight. The old man wants to know how the war ended. The young girl wants her breasts to cause the sun to rise. The thinker wants to keep misunderstanding alive. It's all right if the earthly monk is buried near the altar. It's all right if the singer fails to turn up for her concert. It's good if the fat old couple keeps whirling around. Let the parents sing over the cradle every night. Let the pelicans go on living in their stickly nests. Let the ducks go on loving the mud around their feet. It's all right if the ant remembers his way home. It's all right if Bach keeps reaching for the same note. It's all right if we knock the ladder away from the house. Even if you're a Puritan, it would be all right if you join the lovers in their ruined house tonight. It's good if you become a soul and then disappear. Thank you, Robert Bly. From My Sentence Was 1,000 Years of Joy, that collection of his. There's a famous poem that you may know by W.H. Auden. It's called Funeral Blues. Stop all the clocks. Cut off the telephone. Prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos and with muffled drum bring out the coffin. Let the mourners come. Let aeroplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good. Thank you, Auden. I felt this next one worth including. It's a beautiful one. David White. Farewell letter. She wrote me a letter after her death, and I remember a kind of happy light as I sat by the rose tree on her old bench by the back door, so surprised to receive it, wondering what she would say, looking up, before I could open it, and laughing to myself in silent expectation. Dear son, it is time for me to leave you. The words you are used to hearing are no longer mine to give. You can only hear those words of motherly affection now from your own mouth, and only for those who stand motherless before you. As for me, I must forsake adulthood and be bound gladly to a new childhood. You must understand this apprenticeship demands of me an elemental innocence from everything I have ever held in my hands. I know your generous soul is well able to let me go. You will in the end be happy to know my God was true, and that after so many years of loving you so long, I find myself in the wide, infinite mercy of being mothered myself. P.S. All of your intuitions were true. Thank you, David White. Well, this next poem, Fare Thee Well, it was for my soul brother, Brad Hammer, on his impending journey into the cosmos, a chosen journey, as he was diminishing so greatly from ALS. And so right on the cusp of his ending, I composed this poem, and I was at least able to say a deep goodbye with it, and he read it at his passing. Fare thee well. Fare thee well, dear friend, dear man, rare man, beloved brother, I and others have traveled, reveled with so joyfully, so gratefully these years, seasons, evolutions. As you open your wings now to the wonder of a journey into the greater mystery, maybe the eternal harmony, unity, infinity of what lies beyond this mortal coil, the one you brought your best self, imperfectly perfect self to. This earthly soil of living and loving your being grew so one of a kindly in and feelingly through. As you move to join, rejoin the whirling, beckoning, soul-singing constellations in a shower of star-dusted feelings, reveries, memories. As you lead the way for us someday to follow you, and sometime, glad time, meet you again, greet you there, as you head off and leave the starlight on for us. And we, dear friend, we who remain, leave the heart light on here. Till then, for you. Questions about loss for you, dear listeners. Questions about loss. Was there ever a time you lost your way in life? What was it like? How did you find it again? What loss are you afraid of most of all these days? Is it your health, your home, your money, your dignity, your resilience? How have you learned to live with losing loved ones, whether a partner, a child, relative, good friend? What thought would you offer to someone who has yet to experience any such losses, but like all of us will in time? How aware are you of the immense rise in suicides, especially among teenagers in these United States? Or the epic man-made losses happening across the board in nature? How do you feel about these social and environmental casualties? Are there any cherished freedoms you're concerned about losing? Do you see at real risk in your country, whatever country you belong to or are listening to this broadcast from? Are there family or cultural traditions you grew up with that have since disappeared, that you miss? And if you could reverse one loss, bring one person back from beyond, or something greatly meaningful now gone, who or what would that be? Denise Levertov's poem, Losing Track. Long after you have swung back away from me, I think you are still with me. You come in close to the shore on the tide and nudge me awake the way a boat adrift nudges the pier. I am a pier half in, half out of water. Am I? And in the pleasure of that communion I lose track. The moon I watch goes down. The tide swings you away before I know I'm alone again, long since. Mud sucking at gray and black timbers of me. A light growth of green dreams, drying. Thank you, Denise Levertov. I thought Elizabeth Gilbert had some lovely things to say. This was a reflection on the death of her partner, Raya Elias, who was also her longtime best friend. Grief, she said, happens upon you. It's bigger than you. There's a humility that you have to step into where you surrender to being moved through the landscape of grief by grief itself. And it has its own time frame. It has its own itinerary with you. It has its own power over you. And it will come when it comes. And when it comes, it's a bow down. It's a carve out. And it comes when it wants to, and it carves you out. It comes in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of a meal. It arrives. It's this tremendously forceful arrival, and it cannot be resisted without you suffering more. The posture you take is you hit your knees in absolute humility, and you let it rock you until it is done with you. And it will be done with you eventually. And when it is done, it will leave. But to stiffen, to resist, and to fight it is to hurt yourself. Thank you, Elizabeth Gilbert. It's a very potent piece. I'm only going to read you a couple of the quotes at the beginning of it, if I may. It was written by Stephen Harrod Buhner, Buhner, from COVID grief and the grief of our times, because I think we've all been affected directly or indirectly by the pandemic and COVID and whatever else has come as a result of everything that was called upon or changed around our lives around that. Francis Weller has this. There's three quotes. Francis Weller is this one. Coming to trust the darkness takes time and often involves many visits to this land. Our arrival here is rarely a chosen thing. We're thrown into the darkness or carried there on the back of a blue mood. What we make of this visit is up to us, recalling that the darkness is also a dwelling place of the sacred allows us to find value in the descent. In this place of lightlessness, we develop a second sight. And Colin Parkes, Parkes, said, those who recover from bereavement do not return to being the same people they had been, nor do they forget the past and start a new life. Rather, they recognize that change has taken place, accept it, and examine how their basic assumptions about themselves and their world must be changed, and go on from there. Each of these steps require courage, effort, and time. 3 distinct steps in recovery are: first, that the loss be accepted intellectually. Second, that it be accepted emotionally. And third, that the individual's model of self and outer world change to match the new reality. I wanted to read you David Whyte's piece on friendship. I'm just going to read you maybe the last part of it because, and it's a wonderful piece in his wonderful book, Consolations, which he touches in with a different lens on various topics like friendship. And so in there he says, friendship transcends disappearance. An enduring friendship goes on after death, the exchange only transmuted by absence, the relationship advancing and maturing in a silent internal conversational way even after one half of the bond has passed on. But no matter the medicinal virtues of being a true friend or sustaining a long, close relationship with another, the ultimate touchstone of friendship is not improvement, neither of the other nor of the self. It is witness, the privilege of having been seen by someone, and the equal privilege of being granted the sight of the essence of another, to have walked with them and to have believed in them, and sometimes just to have accompanied them for however brief a span on a journey impossible to accomplish alone. Beautiful. Thank you, David Whyte. The heart is a remarkable thing. It can become sick over many things, over the loss of faith or fortune, death of a loved one, dreams deferred, disappointments or disbeliefs, seeing suffering, then somehow, often miraculously, heal, learn to reopen, sing, feel joy again. I have so much wonderful material. I'm just doing a bit of editing, as I sometimes do, to keep us in time. W.S. Merwin, Memory of the Loss of Wings. An hour comes to close a door behind me. The whole of night opens before me. The great ancient wise Marcus Aurelius, from his Meditations. Even if you're going to live 3,000 more years, or 10 times that, remember, you cannot lose another life than the one you're living now, or live another one than the one you're losing. The longest amounts to the same as the shortest. The present is the same for everyone. It is the loss. Its loss is the same for everyone, and it should be clear that a brief instant is all that is lost. For you can't lose either the past or the future. How could you lose what you don't have? Remember two things. That everything has always been the same and keeps recurring, and it makes no difference whether you see the same things recur in 100 years or 200 or in an infinite period. And two, that the longest lived and those who will die soonest lose the same thing. The present is all that they can give up, since that is all you have, and what you do not have you cannot lose. Thank you, Marcus Aurelius. So many wisdoms from that philosopher. You can never lose your soul. I wrote this back in 2011 in New York City. You can lose your money, friends, your teeth, your temper, your appetite, your perspective, your nerve, even your way in life, but you can never lose your soul, your truest north, the reason for being, our reason for loving. Clarissa Pinkola Estes said, struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help to calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do. I don't believe, dear listeners, we ever really lose our innocence. It might be buried, put away, put away somewhere. But we can find it. We can open into it, sometimes sweetly, sometimes surprisingly, like this moment of mine back in 2017. And I'm curious what some of your moments have been where it's reawakened or ever present. I'm 7 again. Early spring, up in the boughs of the old apple tree of my childhood, a place to float in the clouds of fresh and fragrant white blossoms, feeling my young body sing with the new-sprung bird song, with my sweet boyness, innocence, that the scent of today's tree takes me half a century back to. Preserving your wealth. The kind you'll be more well off preserving, not your millions or summer houses, art collection, or four-wheeled horses, but your wealth of self, without which the rest is hardly truly as meaningful, at least to me, meaning a priceless sense of self, soul, a deep-seated heart, the immeasurable treasure of transcendently loving, a high net worth of emotional health, a whole portfolio of higher possibilities, real riches you can feel but can't calculate, inner assets to float you, see you through all life's crises, illnesses, losses, even the loss of people and things you hold dear, a spouse, a nest egg, a career. True wealth you can bank on, feel fortunate, ever thankful for, if or once you possess it. I wanted to speak to us tonight and together about cultural loss, among some other kinds of things that are larger. This is from act4libraries.org. Cultural loss can give a people a sense of inadequacy, lost identity, anger, and the breaking of ties that bind them to their past. Traditions and customs are linked to culture and dictate the way lives are lived based on the teachings of one's forefathers. It is the respect and perpetuation of those that came before and those to follow. History is riddled with the conquest and loss of cultures. The displacement, assimilation, or annihilation of some was always to be expected when one culture goes to war with another, whether for reasons of status, religion, land, food, or just plain greed. Many cultures have hovered on the brink of extinction, just managing to grasp what little they had and gradually rebuild some of what was nearly lost. Alas, for some, total immersion occurred and has seen their culture minimized and remnants of it hardly recognizable. The sad thing about it is the world will never see the likes of their living culture again. It has faded into history, and there it will be forever dwelling with no one to carry its essence into the future. This is a real blow to mankind, and maybe a sign that his future may not be as carved in stone as he thinks. There's also a piece you might find interesting from Scientific American, last of their kind, What is Lost When Cultures Die? Very interesting piece. Talks about the global voices that are being silenced at a frightening rate, especially when you look at the key indicator, which is of cultural diversity, is language lost, and how rich, not just in words, what it represents, language. They say the ultimate tragedy is not that archaic societies are disappearing, but rather that avertible forces are driving vibrant peoples and languages out of existence. That cultures do not always fade away, but rather may be casualties of other societies' priorities, is actually an optimistic observation because it suggests that if humans are the agents of cultural decline, we can foster cultural survival. Yeah, I agree. I'm doing my part, whatever part I can play. I did want to mention biodiversity loss. From earth.org, that species are going extinct faster than any time in history. If you didn't think it was quite serious, it's wildly serious. And it's a direct result of rampant human activity, our activity, since the Industrial Revolution. The biggest contributor is land and forest clearing to make way for urban and agricultural development. Wildlife trading, which is animal poaching, and overfishing, enormous commercial overfishing. We're fishing at a much higher and faster rate than stocks are able to replenish, which pushes many species to the brink of extinction. Yeah, large issues, possible losses, real losses, and for us to ponder, dear listeners, for us to ponder. And not least the bees. This is from the Defender, Children's Health Defense .org. Dr. Joseph Mercola wrote there, no bees, no food. 75% of the world's food crops depend on pollinators. Bee populations are declining dramatically, in part because of pesticides. And here are actions you can take to help protect bees and other pollinators. And he mentions in here, between 25 and 30,000 different species exist across the globe, and more than 75% of the world's crops depend on them and other pollinators, as do 90% of wild flowering plants. So very, very, very serious for us to focus on the bees, what we can do to get their health back and preserve what they do have. Linda Pastat has this poem, The Death of the Bee. The biography of the bee is written in honey and is drawing to a close. Soon the buzzing plain chant of summer will be silenced for good. The flowers, unkindled, will blaze one last time and go out, and the boy nursing his stung ankle this morning will look back at his brief tears with something like regret, remembering the amber taste of honey. Thank you, Linda Pastan. Interesting, isn't it, how there are things we take even now for granted every day until they're gone, like breathing fresh air, especially pristine air. This is the joys of inhaling sea-salted air, mountain-peaked air, the resinous morning air of an old-growth forest, spring-fed, autumn-leafed, deep wintered air, the luscious air of the tropics, the bone-dry air of the desert, the ionized air before a storm, the fresh, washed air after rain. All the joys of inhaling, drinking from the well of nature's life-pouring, life-giving air. I hope, too, we never lose our sense of wonder, my friends. Think of all that comes from this, great and small, including the enchantment of the seasons and the natural beauty of the earth. This is an ode to spring into the wild green wonder. Under spring's wild blue wonder we enter its new and renewing green, enchanting us round parks and woodlands, ponds, hillsides, meadowlands, awakening us through all our years, all the ages of earth, all the pages of history, poetry, mythology, with its symphony of daring colors, its delicate flowering, its essencing of innocence, ecstasy, of purest presence, beckoning us to fall once again into the wild, green wonder of its outstretched arms, like forever young and eager lovers. I would like to celebrate the impending autumn equinox, happening tomorrow, beginning in just a few hours from now. This was a meditation on it in 2016. I have other odes to equinoxes and solstices, but I've chosen this one from that year. Feel all the light falling. Let all the light fall today in a rare, receiving way, fully, equally, wholly into your hemispheres, your north and south, your left and right brain, your masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, actual and potential self. Pause. Close your sun-lit eyes and slowly, slowly breathe. Open. Widen. Feel the life-giving, life-renewing rays enter the center, the equator of your body, your being, bringing all parts of your inner world into great balance, bathing all parts of you in greater warmth and health, brightening, lightening your places, crevices, passages of darkness, sadness, hiddenness, shadow. Let all the new light falling, streaming, seeking, find and fill you this day with a keener seeing, sense of turning, promise of becoming. I don't have time to share this with you, but I'm going to point you to, from mindingthecampus.com, about reforming our universities, the article called How a Generation Lost Its Common Culture. Pretty startling. Also from, to point you to this interesting article from theatlantic.com titled The Pandemic Has Erased Entire Categories of Friendship. There's a reason you miss the people you didn't even know that well. A good read, very interesting read. Richard Ebling, who's a distinguished professor of ethics and free enterprise leadership at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, on the loss of freedom. Just a couple of passages from his essay. It's difficult, I think, for most of us to even imagine how inconsequential government really was in people's lives, at least at home, in these Western countries, not much more than a century ago. Of course, even before the First World War, the modern welfare state was gaining footholds in these nations. But even with this, and especially in the United States and Great Britain, most people, to use the happy phrase of the British laissez-faire liberal, Herbert Spencer, could go through their daily lives and pretty much, quote, ignore the state. However, if current trends continue in the present direction for too long, the potential and possibility for liberty may be irreparably lost. We need to remember and to forewarn others that liberty is far easier to lose than to be successfully and fully regained once it is lost. And I have this poem of mine. It was written this May 30th, Memorial Day, here in New England. It's called Behind the Bunting. Behind the bunting, behind the flags waving from all the porches and lining the broad street where gleaming red engines and a rousing marching band parade this sun-strong morning, behind the beachgoers and backyard barbecuers, an undernote of remembering all those lost in wars past, an overnote of pondering all those fighting battles for their very lives and livelihoods in this America present. Langston Hughes' poem, Freedom. Freedom will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want my freedom, just as you. Thank you, Langston Hughes. And now we're coming sort of into the last handful of things. I'd like to come back to David Whyte for just a moment around our theme. This is from his book, River Flow. It might be liberating to think of human life as informed by losses and disappearances as much as by gifted appearances, allowing a more present participation and witness to the difficulty of living. What is real can never be fully taken away. Its essence always remains. Yes, I think we leave great imprints that are spirit and energy, and I feel people that I've lost that I loved greatly that passed away in my molecules, like my dear father-in-law was one of my greatest friends in the world at one point while he was alive for decades at that time. Mark Strand's poem, The End. Not every man knows what he shall sing at the end, watching the pier as the ship sails away, or what it will seem like when he's held by the sea's roar, motionless, there, at the end, or what he shall hope for once it is clear that he'll never go back, when the time is past to prune the rose or caress the cat, when the sunset torching the lawn and the full moon icing it down no longer appear. Not every man knows what he'll discover instead, when the weight of the past leans against nothing, and the sky is no more than remembered light, and the stories of Cirrus and Cumulus come to a close, and all the birds are suspended in flight. Not every man knows what is waiting for him, or what he shall sing when the ship he is on slips into darkness, there at the end. Thank you, Mark Strand. That's from The Continuous Life. It's also a book I wanted to point you to The River by Olivia Lang, Laing. Beautiful, beautiful book. Sort of has lots of metaphors related to our lives, but it also has a lot of essence of place and spirit of place. And just a line from that in there is that she says the tenacity, no matter what, like rivers, whether it ends or runs down, the tenacity of our physical remains. Their unwillingness to fully disappear is at odds with whatever spark provides our animation, for the whereabouts of that after death is a mystery yet to be unpicked. What is this world really? We're told we have infinite choice, and yet there's so much that occurs beyond the perimeters of our command. We do not know why we're set down here, and though we may choose the moment when we leave, not a single one of us can shift the position we've been assigned in time, nor bring back those we love once they have ceased to breathe. Olivia Lang, To the River. Okay. Well, next to last is I'm going to come back to Marcus Aurelius once more, the ancient philosopher. Human life, duration momentary, nature changeable, perception dim, condition of body decaying, soul spinning around, fortune unpredictable, lasting fame uncertain. Sum up, the body and its parts are a river, the soul a dream and mist. Life is warfare and a journey far from home. Lasting reputation is oblivion. Then what can guide us? Only philosophy, which means making sure that the power within stays safe and free from assault, superior to pleasure and pain, doing nothing randomly or dishonestly and with imposture. Not dependent on anyone else's doing something or not doing it, and making sure that it accepts what happens and what it is dealt as coming from the same place it came from, and above all, that it accepts death in a cheerful spirit as nothing but the dissolution of the elements from which each living thing is composed. If it doesn't hurt the individual elements to change continually into one another, why are people afraid of all of them changing and separating? It's a natural thing, and nothing natural is evil. Marcus Aurelius, from his Meditations. And last for now, till the next live cast, Memorial Day. This was written in 2020 in Weekapaug, Rhode Island, on Memorial Day. Memorial Day. Mine and yours, when we might also honor the times we fell by some wayside in our life, heroically, or simply humanly, or might commemorate the loss of some cherished part of ourself, maybe a sense of youth, innocence, once deep wonderments, might raise a flag or pin a flower to our heart to remind ourselves we're still alive, still making our way, still making our own worthy history. Thank you again for leaning in, for listening and feeling in, as many of you so keenly and often do, and for sharing these broadcasts with others. Likewise, for sending contributions of thanks for a program like this or for my effort behind them all. If you have a suggestion or a question, please do send a note. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. You can make a gift in any amount, anytime, by Venmo to fivefold, FIVEFOLD, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal, or by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891, or through my site, thepoetorialist.com, in the Donate tab. At times, patrons can also host or sponsor me as a working poet in residence in a given place in the world for a given time, in a given season, to create a new flight of poetic art dedicated to them. Email me and we can discuss the possibilities. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online, on YouTube, on the Floating Poetry playlist. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, may you learn to live with your personal losses, with your griefs. Have compassion for those suffered by others unknown to you, to us across the world. And be aware of those of lasting, even devastating impact in the larger world that we can join to avoid for the sake of our Earth, Mother Earth, of our biosphere, for the sake of preserving the best virtues of our society, for the sake of our humanity. And amidst all, before us right now, may we each and all find rays of grounding, understanding, and welcome solace Goodbye for now, and good spirits.